Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. This is another comparison between 35mm film and digital full frame. This time instead of using natural light I shot in a studio using flash, and I went for this moody kind of look with dark shadows and high contrast and all that stuff, and this is a good way to see the latitude, of a medium, the dynamic range, and how much detail you can capture in shadows and highlights, and how much you can work with the data that you capture basically. And I have to say I overall I like the results from the film. This is Portra 160 again, 35mm. I used my Canon EOS 1N with a 50mm 1.4 lens from Sigma Art, and on my digital one I used the 51.2 Sigma on my Sony a7 IV. So I have a few photos here to compare. I tried to find photos with similar framing and posing. The lighting obviously was the same between them, and when I did edits I tried to get the best out of both full frame digital and 35mm film, but at the same time I also tried to match them a little bit. I tried to keep them as close as possible to real life, making them look natural, and also adding a bit of a look on top of that, but not too strong. So because I shot Portra 160 on film, I decided to use a Portra 160 style in Capture One to mimic the Portra look. So without any further ado, let's go into the comparison. So as you can see, the framing is very similar. It's just different in height because of the way I compose with the film camera, with a single spot, single point focusing system, and I have to focus and recompose. So I couldn't frame them in an identical manner, compared to the digital ones, but I did my best. Of course, just like in my previous video, you will be able to see that the digital is way sharper, and the focusing system is many times better and more accurate. It's basically perfect. So we're not going to talk about that. We're just going to talk about the overall look and feel of the photos, and if the difference in look and detail is huge, and we'll look at things where, or places where film falls short compared to digital, and vice versa. So as you can see, in terms of detail, there's no doubt about it that digital is more detailed. And also when I edited the digital ones, I reduced the clarity and the texture to give it a more filmic look, so it wouldn't be super sharp, and it wouldn't pop too much, And also the sharpness, I reduced it to 0 from 160 or whatever the number was, by default in Capture One, and you can still see plenty of detail, but I think it looks way more filmic than and less digital than before. So in terms of mimicking the film look, I think this is the closest I can get without compromising the image quality too much. And the grain also, I chose to add the grain, the tabular grain, with 15, I think between 15 and 20 in terms of impact, and the granularity around 75. So this is, in my opinion, the best way, the closest look to the real grain that I'm getting on the 35mm film. Okay, so yeah, I mean, in terms of colors, I have to be honest that I prefer the way the colors look on the film one. It has a bit of a look, you know, like with warm highlights and you know, fairly neutral shadows. On the digital one it looks more natural, closer to reality, the way things were in real life over there. The backdrop was a gray backdrop, so it only has a little bit of a bluish tint in it. As you can see, it's actually in certain parts, in the darker parts, it's actually neutral, but it looks a bit bluish because of the color contrast, because of the warm highlights and midtones. And but if you look at the numbers here, you can see they're very close. It's quite neutral in both cases. The difference is minimal. So yeah, I mean, I like both of them. The left one, which is the digital one, is much closer to real life and you know, more detailed and all that stuff. It looks modern and also digital, at least for this comparison, while the one on the right, the film one, has this softer look, mainly because not necessarily because of the film being soft, because it's a professional grade film, so it should be sharp enough, but because of the focusing system in the camera. Even though I was top down and all that, it's still not as reliable as the digital one. But overall I really love the look, at least for this shot here of the film. And I don't think they're that far off, you know. I mean, taking into account that I actually used the Portra preset on my digital ones. Let's move to the next one. Again, very similar pose with a tiny difference in composition, but again you see that warmer, softer look in the film one compared to the more natural look, closer to reality, on the digital one on the left. Let's quickly look at the details zoomed in. As you can see, the grain and everything is quite similar. The shadows have a bit of tint of reddish magenta tint in the film one, that it was stronger than this, but I actually used a bit of a color grading on top of the look that the film gave me, to, you know, make it look closer to real life and to get rid of that magenta color cast in the shadows. That's the thing with film, because these were really moody and dark shots, and because this is black, and you know, with these moody shots, not a lot of light was falling on the black one. It doesn't reflect a lot of light back. You kind of have the tendency to lose detail, especially color detail, not just detail in general, but color detail, and you get like a color cast. So when you balance the image for the film ones to make the skin tone look proper, and, you know, the overall look of the image to look balanced in terms of, you know, white balance and tint and all that, then you're still left with some color cast in the shadows for the most part, that we have to, you know, try to get rid of in post, you know, with color grading and all that stuff. But overall, you can still, you know, get really good images with a distinct look. You can actually see the distinct film look here, but I think it's not just the color and the overall rendering of the image, but also the highlights. If you look at the forehead here and the cheek where the highlights are from the lights, they're smoother here. They almost look like they've been, you know, blended a little bit, even though I haven't done anything like that. You know, I did the retouching on both of them, but I did the same amount of retouching, you know, and you can see that the transitions are smoother in the film one compared to the digital one. Also maybe because of the lack of detail compared to the digital, but still As you can see here again, the highlights on this letter C here, they look slightly different. Of course the light falls a little bit different here. Here you have the letter C in the shadow of the top, you know, but you will see that this is the way film renders highlights. Even here in the background, you know, these folds in the paper from the background, they're more visible in the digital one as opposed to the, you know, the more flatter look, more blended look that I'm getting in the film ones. So this is actually one of the main differences that I can see, apart from, you know, some color variation, color differences, you know, that I see in the film ones. For the most part, for the natural ones in studio, it doesn't matter. The background, the out of focus areas of the image in the background, they blend nicer in the film ones compared to the digital ones. Let's move on to the next one. I don't want to make this video too long. So again, very similar, just a different pose, but I just wanted to give you guys more options so you can see the difference. Grain similar. I have this warmer look here that I could have copied into the digital ones. You know, I could have made the highlights a little bit warmer to match it even more, but my goal wasn't to match them, you know, 100%. I just wanted to get them as close as possible to each other, but also keep the inherited look of each medium. So digital will always look more natural, will always have more color detail, more accurate colors in the darker parts of the image, because digital does better in the shadows and worse in the highlights compared to film. But you know, overall I really like these faded blacks here. It wouldn't be good for fashion or certain type of fashion look if they really want to see the fabric and all that, but for a moody artistic look, it really looks apart, you know. Even these shadows here on the upper body here on the skin, they look really nice compared to the digital one. They have this blended faded look, which a lot of people are trying to replicate in the digital photography, and I'm not saying you can't do that, because you can obviously do it, but it's just it has a different, you know, texture and look overall, the film, you know. And for me, the most obvious is the background always, even though you might think, well, it doesn't look that different. At least here on my computer, on a big display, big calibrated display with high resolution 4K display, I can actually tell the difference, you know. And also here the back, you see it has this flatter look. You can still see plenty of details here, but it has a flatter look, less detailed than the digital ones, but it's just, it looks nicer. It has this kind of bloom, a little bit of bloom, that gives it that, you know, film look that everyone loves and tries to replicate. This one I couldn't find two identical poses, so I chose poses where the model is facing towards the left of the frame, you know, more or less. Again, same story here. You can see more detail on the you know, paper backdrop here compared to this one. It's a little bit more blended, as if it was blurred, as if I applied some Gaussian blur in the post-processing or something like that, you know. It has this flatter look that I actually like. So yeah, in terms of details, you see the film is always less detailed. It also has a low resolution because I scanned on a digital camera, on APS-C camera, and I also cropped on the image. It wasn't properly, I wasn't using the entire sensor, you know, so I didn't want to rescan. So it has less resolution, the file, than this one. Couple that with the low resolution of 35mm film stock compared to a 33 megapixel digital camera, and you will see this difference. But there's still plenty of detail here to see skin texture and all that, but it just has this beautiful look, you know. Again, there's these transitions here from highlights to, you know, darks. It's very smooth, and the highlights are never popping too much. They're more subdued, you know, the highlights. That's something. If you look at the nose here, the highlight on the nose is very bright and detailed. Here it's less bright, so that would be one of the differences. Also, the way the highlights look. Okay, let's go to the next one, and this is a good example where you can see the superior, you know, color reproduction when it comes to digital. So of course I didn't try to, I added more color in this one just to get closer to the real digital one that is much closer to the reality. The backdrop wasn't this desaturated in real life, and I had to add a bit more color here, you know, saturation and you know, some color balance. You know, I played with the color balance just to get it to look closer to how I saw it in real life. And again, you have this really nice highlights on the cheek and the forehead and everything. That those transitions are always smooth and milky on the film. Maybe that's also due to the low resolution of the film overall, but still it's just a beautiful look. And also here on the t-shirt you can see it looks less detailed. It kind of looks blurry, even though it was shot at f5.6, just like this one. I had the same settings. And by the way, I was shooting with a little bit more light on the film one because I know film needs more light than digital, especially for the darker part of the image. So I was like, on all lights that I used, I was 1/3 of a stop higher on power than the digital ones, maybe even more if I remember correctly on some lights, just to make sure I have plenty of light, so I wouldn't have super super mushy shadows. Or you can already see here that there's less detail here. They kind of blend. It's beautiful, like this faded look, don't get me wrong, but you can actually see more details here. Even though it's dark, you can clearly see more details in the digital one. Color wise, you know, I mean, the skin tone is quite similar in terms of color and saturation. The main difference is the pink. The pink backdrop here looks less saturated, and that's because, you know, film doesn't really capture color very well if it's not properly lit. I mean, the background got plenty of light, I'm not saying it didn't, but once you go below a certain amount of light for film, it kind of loses saturation in the colors. So the more light you give it, the more saturated the color will look. So in the future I'm gonna do another photo shoot, actually multiple photo shoots with natural light and also flash in the studio, and I'll make sure I'm gonna overexpose. I'm gonna give more light to the film than before. I'm gonna overexpose by more than one stop, somewhere in between 1 and 2 stops. I don't want to go too bright to blow out highlights or anything like that, so it's probably going to be 1 stop and a third, 1 stop and 2/3 maximum. And I'm going to make sure that I'm going to give more light to the fill light, more power to the fill light to fill in the shadows a little bit more for the film one compared to the digital one, and then I will be able to see if I'm going to get more details in the shadows. But yeah, overall it's just the film has a beautiful look. I could have worked a little bit more on this one and make the pink more saturated, give it a little bit more pop, but even like this I like it because the subject pops more. The subject is properly, the skin is properly saturated and it looks beautiful. It has a beautiful color, and yeah, overall it's a really nice look. Let's see, but I think if we're talking about the digital ones, I think I'm getting really close to the film look in terms of overall color and overall look, and these subdued details. I lowered the details in the sharpness and everything in the digital one, and I added enough grain. And if you add enough grain, select the right proper type of grain, it gets really close to the digital one. As you can see, it actually looks much better on the digital one, because on the film one you also have like some color noise. It's not just lumen noise, it's also color noise, but it still looks good. I'm not saying it looks bad. Overall, yeah, digital is king. There's no doubt about it, but it also depends on the purpose of the image, right? Where the image is going to be used, how much detail you need, and bear in mind that this is 35mm film, which is very small compared to like a medium format 6x7 or 6x5 film, which would give you more of a digital look. It would look more like on the left side here, like the digital one. So maybe someday I'm gonna get my hands on a medium format digital one, like a 6x5 or something like that, and compare the digital, the full frame digital, with the medium format film, and see if they're much closer than this case. I suspect they will be so close that you wouldn't be able to tell the difference in terms of detail and resolution and like color information in the shadows, because medium format film is king when it comes to film. There's no doubt about it. I've seen plenty of videos. I haven't tested it myself, but I've seen plenty of videos to know that. But yeah, I mean, you can really get close with a full frame camera if you know what you're doing. You can really get close to the film look in terms of colors and that softness and highlight transitions. I mean, they look really good in this one here. They're very similar to the film one, but with more detail and more resolution. Let's move on to the next one. I only have two more comparisons. So this one, loaded again. I mean, I changed the yellows here. They in the digital one, by default they looked a little bit less saturated and a bit more towards lime, not lime, like a lemon yellow, rather than this. But I changed the hue a little bit to make it look just like it would look in a film shot, because this is one of the better characteristic of film when it comes to color. It always has beautiful yellows, beautiful reds, beautiful blues, way nicer than the digital ones. And I think I've done a really good job mimicking that here. I mean, you can see this red from the text here is a little bit brighter in this one compared to this one. With film, like reds and yellows and blues, they will always be a little bit darker with more density. The colors are denser because of the difference in technology, but you can get really close with the digital one. And this one isn't like a perfect match in terms of pose, but I needed to compare like half body, 3/4 to half body, upper body shot. So these were the closest ones to compare. So again, you can see here the pink is not as saturated and vibrant as it is here, but otherwise the film one looks really good. And let's go to the last comparison here. Again, digital on the left as always, and what I did, I edited the digital ones. I added a lot of contrast, and I played with the exposure and everything to get it to look as close as possible to the real Portra 160 shot on film. And apart from a tiny difference in colors, I think I got really close in terms of contrast, the way the skin looks, and even the background. But again, if you look here, the background looks a little bit blurrier on the film, on the digital one, and a bit more smooth, and it has a bit more texture, but also more of a flatter look. This is a recurring theme with the way the background looks in the film ones. It looks different. It looks like almost like I took two different shots. I shot the background separately, and then I shot the subject, and I kind of put the subject on top of the other background. It's hard to explain, even with natural shots, with outdoors, natural light, with the backgrounds in nature and everything. I get the same kind of look. The background looks very different from the digital one, and even though I'm matching the settings, so the depth of field is the same, the settings are the same, lenses are very comparable and all that, same brand, just different generations, but not a huge difference between them. And still the film ones have this beautiful look when it comes to the background, which I have to say I prefer if I compare it to the digital one. This one, by the way, when we're talking about details, this one, because I was much closer to the subject, and the film could capture more detail. As you can see, it's much closer to the digital one when it comes to the detail capture. It's not quite as detailed, but it's getting much closer. So yeah, guys, you can take really good photos on film if you know what you're doing. I'm not pretending I'm an expert, but I'm sure I'm gonna get even better than this. The more I'm gonna shoot film, the more I'm gonna understand the best way or the best settings, especially compared to the digital, that I'm gonna apply to get a much better image on film, much closer to the digital one in terms of detail and color, and color accuracy and the shadows and all that stuff. But yeah, overall, at least in these shots, I managed to get them quite close, and if I would have to choose, not based on detail but based on overall look, I would choose, for at least half of these photos, the film version of it, because it just has a different kind of feel. Like in this case, on the left one, you can tell it's a digital one because it's super clean and super detailed, and the one on the right, you can easily tell it's a film one because of this textured look that it has. And even though it pops in the it looks 3D, it doesn't look digital at all, because it's not, and you can actually see that difference. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys, and I hope you enjoyed this comparison and you managed to get an idea about what you can get on film, especially because we're talking about 35mm film, which is considered like a day-to-day film. It hasn't been used historically as a professional option, because when it comes to fashion and high-end work, everyone was using the medium format film, like 645 or 6x7, and this was reserved more for low budget things, for family issues, vacations and stuff like that, not for high-end professional work. But these days, with social media, and maybe if you print things, photos at like smaller sizes, and you still want that film look without spending a lot of money on film and developing just for 10 shots or 15, 16 shots, then 35mm film can be a really good option, especially if you get closer like this. If you should stop down, or if you get close enough to the subject, you can get really beautiful shots. And if you know how to light it, then you're gonna get beautiful colors and enough details even in shadows that would make it look professional. So again, thanks for watching, and hope to see you in the next one.